Welcome back to the Scale Forward podcast, the show where we unpack what it takes to grow, scale, and win in business today. I'm your host, Russell, and today I'm joined by the CEO of Baremetrics, Luke Marshall. Baremetrics is a well-known analytics tool in the SaaS world. If you're a founder, growth marketer, or just someone who stares at way too many Stripe dashboards, I think this episode will be for you. Luke, welcome to the show.
Russ, thanks for having me, mate. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. We've briefly chatted before. You have an interesting background. Do you mind filling us in on your origin story? How did you step into the role of CEO at Baremetrics? What drew you in?
Yeah, for sure. I guess, I've got a bit of an interesting background when it comes to what you'd regard as a SaaS founder or a SaaS leader. Spent my first part of my career in the Australian Army as a military officer. Did about 10, 11 years there in the full-time forces and started to sort of move into more admin roles. I was in a combat role and moved into sort of some business-focused roles as you do as you progress through the ranks. Saw the light when it came to, for guys like us, the standard step out of the military is to go and do an MBA, go work for a defense contractor and consult in that KPMG, EY space. I did the MBA path, but then the consulting space really wasn't for me. And I started working with Manpower Group, a recruiting company that was working alongside defense in the digital transformation space. So I was doing digital projects and rollouts of big software projects across the nation. I got a tap on the shoulder from an ex-colleague of mine who'd been working in SaaS for about a year and said, hey, the boss wants more guys like you, sort of leadership experience, small team disciplined approach to operations. And I'm like, hey, I know nothing about software. What's that? He goes, doesn't matter. All we need is someone who's going to come in, apply a playbook, look at that doctrine and be able to get it out there. We believe we know what best practice is. So come and give it a go. And at that stage in my career, I was keen to do something that wasn't defense at all and get out and test myself elsewhere. So I jumped. I went over to a meeting in Las Vegas and sat in a room where 6 different CEOs at the time gave us their quarterly board reports, and I listened in and I thought, yeah, this is something I could see myself having a crack at. So jumped into my first SaaS company, ran a sales team, working in the private equity firm that owned those companies as a sort of board advisor across the board. And in 2020, we acquired Baremetrics as part of our fund. And I immediately loved the platform when we looked at it. The richness of the dashboards, the community, the story of the founder, Josh Pigford, was really compelling. Prolific, creator, and had a really good aura around the product itself. And the space was not going anywhere. Everyone was moving into building subscription-based businesses. They needed greater insight. So the product was, really, really fit for market. That's not to say we've necessarily dominated the market in that space, but the platform itself is definitely super appealing. About nearly on 2 years ago, I guess, I stepped into the CEO role more directly outside of that board advisory and really just tried to figure out what's next. What's next for Baremetrics outside of just a core focus on Stripe, and how do we continue to grow alongside our client base? And that's where I've come to be where we are today.
That's a really interesting background. I've never actually met too many. I didn't know that was the status quo coming out of the force like that. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of disciplines that go with that background. I'm sure they transitioned over into the business world, but you also got to be a fly on the wall by sitting on the board before stepping into CEO,
Correct.
Seeing how these large funds acquire companies and everything like that. In the early days, as you stepped in, what was Baremetrics' sort of core offer for the market? You mentioned you might not necessarily have 100% product market fit or it might be evolving. Can you remember what the offer was back then?
100%. Yeah. So the core of Baremetrics, and this is where I fell over as a CEO when I first took over, and I'll tell you the reason, is that the reason we loved Baremetrics at the start was Josh, the original founder, built it for Stripe. He had a personal pain, personal problem around the data that he was receiving from Stripe. And so he built a product that would help him gain greater insights and do more with that data. And so he did that really well for Stripe. From there, he started to build out other integrations with, ChargeBee and Shopify partners, Apple, Google, etc., and continue to expand until they hit sort of a plateau of those integrations and where the growth was coming from. When I stepped into the CEO role, I saw Stripe as a semi-competitor in a way, in that they're continuing to build their own internal analytics tools, their internal metrics, their internal dashboards. And so I was quite combative at the start. I'm like, right, we need to build a moat outside of Stripe to allow us to continue to grow without relying on Stripe customers. So we started to push into Shopify partners. We started to really increase our presence on ChargeBee. We started to do more with Google and Apple, sort of Stripe plus Google, Stripe plus Apple and Google. But the funny thing was, the more I did with those markets, and we saw success in there, we started to land more clients in those spaces. My Stripe funnel continued to grow. People were still coming to us for our Stripe offering. And so I started to come to the realization, I'm like, some of the things I did see in a board position across other companies is when you ignore your core, what got you to where you are now, when you start to ignore that and try to do too much outside of that, that's when you start to stagnate and fall away, right? And so there's a book that I often refer to when people ask me about what sort of business book do I like. It's called Profit from the Core. And one of the key case studies in there is the Coca-Cola case, right? Old Coke versus new Coke, the release of new Coke and the subsequent failure, completely isolating their core market. And then it wasn't until they went back to classic Coke, whether deliberately or not, they regained their market share over Pepsi. And so I think it applies on all levels, even down to the level of a SaaS company. You think you're bigger than you are, you start to try and do too much, and you forget what got you where you are now. And that's what I did. I forgot that Stripe was still very much a part of our funnel. As a result, we actually switched focus and went back to building content for Stripe, building more tools for Stripe, filling gaps in their roadmap. And I actually sat down with our partners over at the Stripe App Store just last month in San Francisco. And I said to them, hey, how do I become a better partner for you? How do I continue to build stuff that's going to help your clients become more sticky for Stripe, but also give them a tool that's going to enable them to grow their business with us? And so we're working with them a lot closer now to actually fill those gaps with our Stripe users. Over 75% of my PQLs, my qualified leads that actually connect to payment platform are Stripe users. It's just that they've continued to grow as we now focus back on them.
You mentioned you're doing more content around Stripe.
Yeah.
Is there any other channels that are seeing a lot of success for you right now?
Yeah, two big things for us at the moment. One, we've actually released it to a closed beta at the moment, a messaging function. We realized too, along with Stripe doesn't really do customer communication very well. And people more and more want to do, customized email flows to either prevent churn, get in front of annual renewals, get in front of or send coupons out. And they don't want to do it in outside of their core platform. So I have to go subscribe to a MailChimp or a SendGrid or whatever else. If we can offer them a mailing engine inside Baremetrics to enable them to talk to previously churned customers that have activated a trial on a new part of the product, like all of those in-product messaging that you want to do to really get closer to your customer base, we're releasing a messaging function that's going to allow our clients to do that using any attribute in Baremetrics or Stripe for that matter to build a cohort and then send a specific one-off or a campaign to them. That's really good for us. The other area we've seen really start to grow has become more and more desired by the founder community in particular is forecasting. So building future-proofed plans. And we released our Forecast Plus feature probably 18 months ago off the back of a bolt-on acquisition called Flightpath Finance. And that was a bit of a switch because it actually integrates with your accounting software, Xero and QuickBooks. It brings your balance sheet in, your P&L, and allows you to model out future scenarios using that functionality. But the extra step there now for us is to build a revenue modeling tool in which you can adjust things like your trial to NPC conversion rate, and then what does it do to my revenue 6 months down the track? If I increase my marketing spend to increase the acquisition of this plan, particularly this product, what does that do to my expenses and my marketing over the course of the next 6 months? Building out robust scenarios to allow our users to not only analyze their current revenue picture, but what am I doing in the future? I think that's been a learning for a lot of founders coming into this era of focus on profitability. I'd say in the early 2000s, sort of the late 2010s, I think was kind of the golden era for SaaS subscription, right? In particular, is that we were seeing multi-year agreements. We were seeing, 7x valuations based on revenue. Revenue valuations were the big exit measure. Now, rule of 40, as opaque as it can be, is kind of like coming back into vogue. The EBITDA margins are what people are looking to value a company on exit, as well as revenue growth potentially. So knowing that you're trying to become more profitable, more proficient with your spend, and have a handle on your variable and fixed expenses means you need to be able to model what the future looks like more accurately than before. It's not just growing your costs anymore. We need to be able to have sustainable, measurable growth under different scenarios. So that's where we're seeing ourselves move as well, offering future insights to try and model out future success as well as present day.
What are some of the metrics that you think some people track that they get wrong, or maybe 3 metrics that we definitely should be focusing on if we're at 30 to 100K mark MRR?
Yeah, I often talk about this and say that the Mr. Growth, new MRR, churn, contraction, expansion, they're the core sort of metrics that you want to have at any given time. And then depending on your stage of growth, you're going to focus on different things. And I think the market did a disservice to founders a few years ago when Snowflake did really well at their net revenue retention. And they were lauded as this Goliath that was able to have 160% net revenue retention year on year, continuing to grow, right? And so NRR became this really focused metric for a lot of SaaS companies. Most of SaaS companies aren't Snowflake, right? They don't have that land, expand, explode capability that Snowflake has or had. It's still growing as it is. So I'd suggest that at that 30K mark, really, if you've been nailing down your MRR and you've got a really good handle of that, you really want to start analyzing your LTV and your net revenue retention by cohort. So we're not necessarily now starting to look at net revenue retention, gross, and expanding accounts. We're saying by product, by plan, by attribute, right? Who's sticking with me? In my LTV, who is actually sticking around the longest? And then you can start to backtrack and say, why? Was it the marketing campaign they came from? Did they start on a particular plan and then upgrade? Were they offered a discount and then they came on board in this case? So I'd suggest that LTV is probably one at that 30K and above mark that you really want to focus on, if not only because it becomes more valuable the longer you've been in business. Things like MRR are immediate, right? You see a new MRR every month. LTV requires a lifetime of a customer to start to become value. If you're tracking a 30-day LTV in the first 6 months of your business, it's not going to mean much to you. But the more data you build and the bigger customer base you get from different channels, it's going to become immensely valuable for you to understand how to get more of the customers that are staying with you.
Yeah, totally agree. Hey, Luke, how involved maybe recently are you with talking to some of your customers? Because the next question that I've got is, Baremetrics has these beautiful dashboards. If you haven't seen it, you can YouTube them and perhaps sign up for a free trial. But is there a customer story that you're aware of recently where they weren't tracking data and then good data led them to make these awesome, smart decisions that then just took their business to the next level?
You know what I see more often than not, Russ, is that it's not necessarily they weren't tracking something. It's something they didn't realize they had until they saw it in front of them. So it wasn't like negligence necessarily. It was more ignorance, I say. And I won't zero in on one particular customer that sort of had a, come to Jesus revelation moment necessarily. But I definitely know that our customers, when they start to dig into their dashboards in Baremetrics and they start to say, well, what does this mean? And they'll ask us, right? And they'll say, what does this mean here? That net revenue retention one's an interesting one because the table and the waterfall, the way it falls out is you can quickly see 60% after 3 months. And what does that mean? It means, well, you've lost 40% of your customers by month 3. So why is that? So whatever your CAC is, you've just essentially lost all that before they've even paid back, and you figure out the payback period, etc. So getting into charts that they otherwise haven't seen in Stripe, otherwise haven't seen in Excel, really does reveal those growth levers that we're trying to uncover. The other thing that I find really interesting is the part of our tool that manages dunning, so failed payments and delinquencies. On average, our clients are recovering 20 to 30% of lost revenue per month. And the reason they're doing it is because they're just letting sort of delinquencies and failed credit card charges be managed elsewhere. There's no customized workflow. There's no getting in front of upcoming renewals or upcoming expiring credit cards. And it just becomes like a cost of doing business. I won't say a COGS, but it's just a cost of doing business in their mind. But when you show it to them on paper and say, this 100,000 failed charges you had last month, you could have been recovering 30,000 of that, and that's directly in your bottom line. They're like, oh, I didn't even know. Like, it's phenomenal to me that you wouldn't sort of want to do that straight away. So that's probably the biggest one, I think, is not adequately tracking failed payments, delinquencies, and failed charges. And I think it's become more important now that Stripe has increased their fees associated with disputes as well. You really want to have a good handle on your credit card payment hygiene, just to get away from those unnecessary fees when they come through.
Yeah, that's mind blowing to me actually, and it just makes so much sense when you put it that way. Like, yeah, an expiring credit card. Hit me with some sort of message because I'm not paying attention to that as a business owner, right? Usually, that's insane actually. Speaking of Stripe, I mean, if you've been on Twitter recently or whatever, there's a whole bunch of people, and I don't want to kind of shit on them, but they are having some difficulties with that. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing that customers maybe who are in that ecosystem are unhappy with, or that they've, aha moments as soon as they register with Baremetrics?
Yeah.
What's happening over there that you're seeing?
So to be clear, we work with Stripe customers that are managing their subscriptions in Stripe as well, right? So Stripe has a whole other ecosystem regarding invoicing and payments that we don't necessarily work with. So there's other issues they have with, account management of high risk payment, high risk industries or et cetera that they're worried about. So I've seen issues with that, but that's sort of outside our realm. In our space, what they're coming down to is Stripe still do a really good job of collecting all that data around payments and around subscriptions. They do have a whole wealth of data there. Their API is actually really good. You can do a lot of things for the API, but you're often asking a lot of a maybe non-technical founder to access that data via an API or via a data warehouse, etc., when they just don't have the time, effort, or energy to be able to do that. They may not even know how to write a SQL query, right? You've got a non-technical founder with maybe a lead dev that's building something in QuickTime. You're focused on product, not the data that's coming from your payment platform. So the reason Baremetrics exists in the way it does is we import all that data and present it in a way that's actionable. that you can actually do something with it, right? So Stripe do that great job of having all that data there, and you can access it via the API and via their query engine. But having it in a really easy to use app like Baremetrics just becomes all that much easier for the founder to understand what's going to drive my next step forward.
Yeah, fair enough. So I should have mentioned that often those issues with Stripe are in that quote unquote high risk those industries, and that's definitely a different topic for another day, because there's a whole bunch of payment businesses that deal specifically with high risk.
Yeah, and you can get lost in those echo chambers, particularly on Reddit. If you jump in the Stripe Reddit, there's just a whole host of hate. But when you dig past the surface, there are some legitimate complaints, but a lot of them are just probably mismanaged accounts more than anything else.
Perhaps. Well, look, I just want to circle back with the analytics, with the payments, and then with pricing. Is there a way in Baremetrics that you could help me as a SaaS founder, like test pricing, get data on that, even suggest some sort of pricing models that we could do for our subscription or anything like that?
Yeah, so the biggest benefit we can offer when it comes to pricing is the ability to track how a particular experiment. So we've been on experimentation internally, and we push experimentation to our customers where possible as well, like to advise them on how to experiment with things like pricing, things like products, etc. The biggest benefit that we can offer is the ability to track conversion rates from a trial plan to a paid plan. We can track expansion from a plan up to a new plan, etc. But we have this really cool, probably undersung annotation feature in Bear, where at any given time, if I was looking at a 12-month view of my MRR, I can actually annotate inside Bear, price experiment started, price on product A was increased by 30%, right? And I'll mark that on my graph. That's then transposed across every single metric available to you in Bear. So when you go down to your LTV, you now see that LTV or the ARPU maybe spike up after that point in time. So that experiment's done something. I'm now going to dig back through, and I'm going to go to my customer engine, and I'm going to create a segment that is all customers that were onboarded on this date on this plan, right? The new plan. I'm then going to go to my graphs, and I'm going to go compare this segment to compare to this segment, which is my previous to my current. And I'm going to see how that ARPU has changed, how that MRR has changed, how the LTV has changed, all from identifying when the change occurred and segmenting those customers out. That's the way you want to run experiments. And that's the way you want to be able to see and follow the data. That's the main thing, right? It's one thing just releasing a new pricing plan and going, I hope this works, versus maybe just testing it on a subset of customers and seeing if it's going to take hold.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and it's so valuable to be able to do that. But just wondering, on your opinion on at what point should, I guess it's a twofold question, not Baremetrics essentially. If you're a SaaS founder and you had a software service, what MRR would you stop experimenting with price? And then if you are going to experiment on price, do you have a rule of thumb on how much to increase?
Yeah.
It's a kind of a long-winded question and an open-ended question. Just curious your thoughts on pricing.
Yeah, I think from an experimentation perspective, you should never stop experimenting. Whether like Booking.com, if everyone looks up Booking.com experimentation on Google, you'll find an amazing use case of how they continually experiment at any given time. It's effort. There's a lot of effort there, but the reward is significant if you can get it right. When it comes to pricing in particular, at the start, and this is kind of a double-edged sword as well for founders, when you look inside their Stripe and you see 100 different plans in the first 6 months of business, it's because they've been doing price experiments without really realizing it, right? They'll do a friends and family offer. They'll then go, I made this partnership with an affiliate, so I'm going to offer them this. And then you end up having this sort of clutter in the first 6 to 12 months of business before you find what it is. Two things I always recommend. One is understanding the value metric. And that is, what is it that's driving the use of your platform? And what is it that's getting people to actually want to pay for it, right? So if the value metric is number of seats, if it is number of app actions, if it is MRR, for example, whatever it might be, if that value metric is valuable enough, then people will continue to pay as that grows. The way you want to conceptualize it in your brain is through what we call a value stick, right? And a value stick essentially comes from all your supplier costs, getting to the point of cost of doing business. You've then got your price that you offer your product at. And the top part of that is the willingness to pay. So how much above your current price would people still pay for the platform? And when it comes to that thinking in that way, what you're always trying to do is drive a wedge between price and willingness to pay. You want your clients to be able to say, I would pay twice as much for that if you asked me to, right? But the way you do that is by delivering additional value that's potentially non-monetary in that space. You're offering sub 5-minute support times. You're offering quarterly business reviews. You're offering free marketing in your monthly newsletter, all those sort of things that aren't necessarily linked to the consumption of the platform, but increase that affinity for your product and is above what they're willing to pay in terms. When should you stop experimenting with price? I think when you're effectively scaling and you believe that your price is at a point that is very close to that willingness to pay, you want to start to think about driving another wedge in between there to increase that willingness. And then you can move up market later on, right? And you can test that new ceiling as it is. But if you move past that willingness to pay too quickly, then you're going to see, a great amount of churn if you're not adding additional value while you're continuing to increase your price. Now, I know this is a long-winded response to Russ, but the core thing here is too, price experiments isn't always about increasing prices, right? It's about how you structure your product. If we come back to that value metric, you may well switch from a completely fixed MRR, gold, silver, bronze tier to having a flat fee plus usage. Price is just as much about how is your pricing structured when it comes to, is it a standard gold, silver, bronze SaaS tier, or are you looking at a fixed fee plus a variable consumption model, right? And more we're actually seeing this come out is we're looking at like SaaS plus, which is a subscription fee plus a usage, because I say people in regards to B2B clients, more and more only want to pay for what they're using. So price experimentation in regards to how you structure your pricing is just as important as testing how much slack is in that market as well. So in that regards, I think you need to continue to monitor customer activity, how they're using your product, and listening to the feedback in regards to whether they're happy to continue to pay a fixed fee or whether they're continually going above and beyond that sort of usage metric as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, the pay per usage thing is really interesting to me as per sort of pay per seats. So that's definitely an interesting debate, maybe something we could dive deeper on. Look, I was on your LinkedIn recently and you posted about how, and you mentioned it a little while ago, aggressive account expansion can hurt LTV.
Yeah.
Could you unpack that for me a little bit more?
Yeah, if you ask too much too soon, then that's really going to hurt, and that kind of ties into that value metric, that willingness to pay that I mentioned. If you're continually trying to upsell or continually trying to increase prices as the only method of increasing your LTV, then you're going to quickly butt up against that willingness to pay threshold and start to see churn. Now, the traditional thinking when it comes to price experimentation would be, I can 2x my prices and suffer 50% churn and still be the same as where I am now, right? If nothing else, my ASP has doubled. But the problem with that is that if there's no additional value with that price increase, then the ongoing LTV of those clients that do stick around will probably deteriorate quite quickly. So I guess the aggressive account expansion, when it comes to things like only leveraging price as that expansion model, will hit your churn quite quickly, I'd suggest.
Right. Yeah, makes total sense. In your role, you're doing many things, leading a team. I know you just got back from Dallas overseas, you're scaling the product. You're thinking about customer success. You're doing a whole bunch. How do you personally prioritize what's urgent and important, what's urgent, maybe not so important?
Yeah.
How do you structure your day-to-day and running the team like that?
Yeah. So I start my day quite early. I start about 4:30 a.m. because I line up with my American colleagues. And I really only have the mental bandwidth in that first half hour to look at dashboards myself. I don't like to engage in too many meetings in that witching hour. So for me, the start of my day is all about looking at what's coming overnight. How many trials have already been onboarded? Because by that stage, it's probably about like 10 or 11 in the US, depending on the time zone. So we should have seen some traction overnight from Europe and then into the US hours. So I'll look at our trials that have come in. I'll look at our PQLs. I'll look at who's in my funnel that's of value for that day. And then I'll go back to Intercom and say, right, are there any high-value clients that have been tagged to Intercom for me to address? No. I'll clear my multiple inboxes in my emails. And then I'll start the day generally with my meetings from about 5 a.m. onwards. And I'm usually in meetings with the team. What I try to do throughout I try and time box my week more so than my day. So Monday is usually all internal meetings, one-on-ones, and catch-ups with my team to sort of set the scene for the week. Tuesdays is generally external meetings. So I'm looking at meeting with colleagues from the fund, any other additional meetings that I might have had to book throughout the week. Wednesday, I try and keep free for ad hoc meetings. Friday is so Thursday is like our third-party design, development, SEO, those sort of agencies. I have my agency meetings booked on that day. And then Friday's wrap up. I've got a couple of one-on-ones and again, more ad hoc meetings that I need to. So I try and time box my week more than anything else. But the core things I look at are my KPIs, my funnel metrics, my HubSpot dashboards. A good example of this was just this week. We had a really low amount of PQLs coming from an otherwise really high-performing source for us, one of our blog posts in particular. And I was trying to scratch why has this fallen away? And I went jump into Search Console and I noticed that the impressions had dropped significantly. And then I went to Google Analytics and I saw the same thing and I saw the actual mix of traffic. And I quickly just did a check on when the last Google update was. And the algorithm updated it was between the 11th and the 26th of March, I think it was. And funnily enough, it tied right in with that decline. And so I was like, oh, shit, like what do I do now, right? I was like, I didn't even realize this until I started digging a bit deeper. It's one of those things with data as well. A couple of days in a row, it's just seasonality, right? It just changes. But when you identify that trend, you're like, okay, something is up here. So it took me a good 3 weeks to identify the trend on this high performing post. But when I did, I was like, wow, that's potentially, have a big impact on our funnel in the next couple of weeks because I'm not getting peaky wells from that same source I otherwise was. So I need to do some work on that and figure out how to get eyeballs back on that blog post.
Sometimes you can't. Google just says no. I'm just kidding. Yeah,
No, dead set. I actually funny because I saw some content on LinkedIn about it too. Someone was like, anyone else suffering, organic decline?
Yeah.
And I pinged a couple of my colleagues in the other fund companies and they all said the same thing. And we're going through their search consoles and it was almost to the day, March 10th. And I just started going like this for a few of their really good posts. And we're like, we didn't do anything. We didn't update the content. We hadn't touched it. It'd been good for a long time. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one when that happens. It can really be debilitating for a little while.
I often think that Google's just testing your metal there. Like, if we give you an X div, how long are you willing to, are you willing to invest more? Usually the answer, Luke, is just more content, more links. That's usually what every SEO will end up probably saying.
But also,
we'll just go for an update.
Also, you don't want to second guess Google, but at the same time, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to have to increase paid spend here for a while to cover my traffic, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't want paid. And so I'm like, so Google's changed the algorithm. They've may increase my Google ad spend. I'm like, win-win for them, right? But I'm having to pay more for my leads. Yeah.
It's almost like it's by design.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Hey, look, because this is an interesting one for me. So you're CEO of Baremetrics, which is part of a fund. I haven't had too many conversations where that's the scenario. Usually it's a founder-led CEO. Are you able to open the door and just, quick high-level insights on what it's like to sit at the chair, to talk with some of these fund managers, and what are some of the feedback they're giving you, or what are you necessarily reporting on?
Yeah, so our fund, Xenon Partners, we generally invest in companies like Baremetrics. We're in that sort of SMB SaaS space. We look for fundamentally good products that have just got founders that want to drop the keys and walk away. And we've invested over the last sort of 5-6 years for the majority of our portfolio. So we're in operating mode at the moment. And that's we are a smaller fund that have hands-on operators. So each of the three of us partners, we're all in executive roles. James, my partner, is currently CEO of Adalo, a no-code app. And our other partner, Jason Gilmore, is a CTO with him as well. Jason was my first CTO when I took over general manager of Dream Factory, an API tool. And so we're very hands-on, and we have to be because of the playbook we bring to the table. We bring a very operations-focused playbook that we believe is the best practice for the size of companies we're investing in. So we don't generally deal with a founder sticking around and us guiding them along. We're getting in and getting our hands dirty and getting it done. What we're seeing in our space at the moment, there was the rise of AI off the back of sort of GPT and then every number of wrappers around GPT. Everyone has AI in their product offering at the moment, even if it may well just be a rule-based engine with a bot. So it's kind of hard to pick through the quality, but what you are seeing is the cream is rising to the top when it comes to fundamentally good products that are enhancing productivity or efficiency. And you see that through things like Cursor, things like Bolt, where developers in particular are benefiting from increased efficiencies and speed to market. Adalo hosted an AI hackathon just yesterday, and their community built something like a half a dozen apps within an hour using things like Cursor and Adalo, the no-code app builder, and got them out the door. Things they otherwise would have taken 6 months to build. They even built an internal feature for Adalo on the call as well, that they'd been lingering for months. And so we're seeing the cream rise to the top when it comes to AI, and we're seeing those ones that may have had initial traction that were maybe a low ASP but a high volume model. They're falling away because the functionality or the long-term value is just not there. Things that are sort of like a bit more novel to use are falling away. When it comes to enterprise, we're seeing things like legacy tech starting to catch up, bigger industries that need to be able to communicate with modern apps, and they're stuck on, legacy databases like IBM and things like DB2s and, old dusty servers in the back room that they're now trying to liberate into modern applications. We see those as well. So yeah, there's a lot of data product out there trying to make that happen. But yeah, AI is still the buzz of the town. It's really just trying to identify the ones that actually add value and aren't just sort of a novel approach to a wrapper.
With AI, do you find yourself saying no to a lot of things? Because there's endless things you could do with it. I'm sure ideas are just dropping from the ceilings. Do you find yourself saying no to a lot of these ideas, or are you heavily looking to do something specific with AI?
We're not like in active buy mode when it comes to deploying capital at the moment. So we're more opportunistic. We'll have people come to us and say, "Hey, I've got this company. It's sort of fallen a bit flat. It could do with a small disciplined team. They hit that $1 million ARR mark and they've stalled. What do you think?" And we'll have a look at it. Or we see companies that have been big in the past that have just sort of fallen flat or started to come back down again. We're not in a rush to move into the AI space necessarily. And again, the pitch decks we've seen recently tend to have an inclusion of AI somehow. And when you sort of ask the hard questions about, well, what is the model that you're working on, a lot of the time it can be just sort of, we had to put it in there because that's what people want to hear, right? And I would say we are private equity. We're a bit more conservative. VCs are probably a little bit more liberal with how they're looking at AI companies and which ones are going to, go well. So they expect AI to be in there somewhere. So there is an expectation that it's there. I think it's just you need to be able to be sure that there's quality behind it too. Yeah.
Look, I want to talk about partnerships. You obviously have really, really strong, valuable partnerships. Are you able to talk about the best method that's sort of getting your foot in the door when it comes to partnerships? What's working right now, and how should we go about building these big legacy partnerships?
Yeah, I think I spoke to my marketer about this morning actually, because we've been seeing a lot of good referral traffic from partners in our ecosystem. So we have our open startups page, which is for founders who want to build in public. And it's kind of come back into vogue. There's sort of a period there where founders were a little bit bashful about building in public and wanting to show their data. We've had a few thought leaders come through on LinkedIn that have really started to, I think, crack that door open again. So as a result, we get a lot of requests for affiliates that want to launch on open startups and show their data in the world and use that to drive their own social media. And so for us, that's about really just letting them have beautiful dashboards and present their data in a way that's going to present well on socials. And funnily enough, one of our clients, Mike Strives, his name is, we found him. We knew he was a client of ours, but we didn't really know what he was doing. We sort of knew him as a Baremetrics user. We were on Reddit and we had a request on Reddit for one of the threads we posted on. That he goes, "Oh yeah, I saw you guys on TikTok." And we're like, "You saw Baremetrics on TikTok?" And we're like, "We're not. That's not really our channel." They go, "No, there's a guy on TikTok that's building in public and he's using your dashboards to show how it's done. He's like day 3 of 50 at the moment." And I was like, "Introduce me. Let me know who he is." So we found, and it turned out this Mike Strives, and he's running a podcast, SaaS Coffee Break. And when we saw some of his content, we're like, that's great. So we want to be able to drive value for our users that want to use our dashboards in their content by providing them with easy way to do that through open startups or just via being able to export their dashboards in a usable way and help them do co-value creation on stuff. What can we do that is going to help you elevate your brand while getting our dashboards out to the public for them to see? We believe there's one of our core points of difference when it comes to us and our competitors or our peers is how our dashboards present and the ease of which you can actually manipulate data inside Bear. So the more people that get their eyes on our dashboards, the better. Adam Robinson on LinkedIn, he's the CEO of Retention and RB2B. He's building in public. He's on our open startups page. He posts monthly updates and he's so brutal with himself when it comes to his churn. He's like, "Look at the churn we had in the last month. This is unacceptable." But he posts a Baremetrics churn graph up there. And I'm like, that's awesome, right? So we jump in there and comment. We go, "Where'd you get that graph from?" He's like, "Baremetrics." For me, that I don't want to call it the influencer space necessarily, but those power users, those affiliates that are really happy with the product and happy with the brand, I want to try and continue to elevate them. And I think that's the core thing when it comes to partnerships. In the past, I think we've often been quite I'm saying we as in the SaaS space in general, been quite selfish with what we want out of a partnership, right? It's like, I want rev share, First Nation to be preferred nation agreement, whatever it might be. And we only think about what benefit we can garner from the partnership to drive our revenue growth. And I think more and more you find that if you're a little bit selfless and go into it really understanding that if we're both talking about the same thing and people are talking about my brand in the same breath as your brand, then it's good for both of us. And I'm happy with that, right? And there's little to no negative impact on me or time sink to do this. Why wouldn't I, right? And that's where I think, like, I love jumping on podcasts with people because we get to shoot the breeze on mutually interesting topics, and it's going to help your users, your distribution list, your newsletter, right? They're going to see some really cool stuff. I've got my logo out there, but we've touched on some really good topics that are valuable for everyone. So there's no loser in this space. So yeah, for me, go into partnership talks with a selfless view and just think about how can I elevate the other person's brand and their offering. And it'll eventually come back around to you. It will. I don't think we've done partnerships right in the past. And yeah, it's a bit of a shame.
So simple, really, when you think about it. Open up a partnership conversation with how we can have a win-win. It's not just how can I build my own personal gain or whatever like that. Look at it. So we'll try to kind of wrap this up. What's next for Baremetrics? What are you looking at in terms of what you're building? Because I was just on your Twitter and you guys released a whole bunch of new features in the last 90 days.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the output of features that Beehive, the EXP, pumps out. like it just seems every other week a new feature's coming out. What are you excited about right now, and what's coming up for Baremetrics?
So our biggest thing, one of our core principles is sell to build, right? So we never build something without knowing there's a demand for it. And so our laundry list of feature requirements come from our clients that have either left us in the past because we didn't have A, B, and C, or clients that are saying, hey, I'd really love it if you guys had this. So for us, we're able to draw a direct line between MRI impact and feature. We have to do that before we build, right? So what you're seeing really is the amalgamation of those requests and those MRR-driven developments that are going to actually increase revenue over the long term because people have asked for it, right? High-quality clients are wanting that. Like I said, with the messaging app, we're really excited about increasing our ability to communicate with Baremetrics clients more so. Part of that will be SMS integration into those workflows and recovery. We're partnering with a little tool called Ring Capture. They do really great bulk SMS, one-time password sort of stuff. And we are going to integrate them into our workflows for recover. So not only can you send reminders about upcoming payments, delinquencies, etc., via email, you'll send them via text as well. You'll also then be able to do coupon campaigns, etc., via text in that space. So really tying in how you can increase communication to your Baremetrics customers. But the main focus for us, so the other two components of our roadmap are align ourselves with Stripe users. What is the Stripe roadmap and what gaps in there can we help to fill? How can we continue to pursue filling gaps in Stripe's roadmap and be a better partner to them in their ecosystem? Get more of maybe Baremetrics into Stripe as well as the other way around. And then finally, everything we're doing in the product space for our clients is forecasting, SaaS modeling, scenarios, forecasting financial models, getting the insights you need to adjust those scenarios in the long term versus just looking at your revenue now. Yeah, so three primary things: increasing messaging capabilities and communications with your clients. Secondly, align ourselves with the Stripe roadmap more heavily and fill the gaps that they're not filling. And thirdly, focus our entire product offering around moving into the future. Focus on the future finance space, not just the here and now.
Love it. Are you ready for a couple of rapid fire questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
What's a SaaS tool you can't live without right now?
Slack.
Right. Favorite growth strategy right now?
Land, expand, explode.
Love it. Quick breakdown of that.
Yeah, so ideally you're getting a foot in the door at a low ASP, right? Where you know that the client has potential to increase usage over time. And so you're looking at increase the ESG on board, say for our metrics tool to give them basic dashboards. You're then going to look at how can you add recover into there because recover is going to increase your revenue associated with failed payments delinquencies. And then I'm going to add additional functionality through forecasting and revenue modeling in the future. So just getting that beachhead into an account, which is then going to allow you to increase usage over time and expand. Yeah. That applies for our enterprise software as well.
Plus for a lot of businesses. What's the most underrated SaaS metric?
Churn.
Okay. You mentioned a book before. Would you say that's the number one book that sort of helped you become a leader in your role?
I'd say from a leadership perspective, not necessarily. Profit from the core is a big one, just regarding case studies and understanding how to get back to the core of what made you successful in the first place. The second one I always talk about is the art of profitability. It's got about 20 odd different scenarios in there between a mentor and a mentee, and they bring out these vignettes on how to increase revenue and profitability through different strategies. And each of those vignettes kind of presents itself with a method of being able to do that. And so depending on the product you're working with at any given time, a lot of those can be quite useful to reflect on and see if that's going to help. So that's the other one, art of profitability. Yeah.
Right. And finally, what is one piece of advice you would give for a first-time founder?
Continual experimentation, I think, is important. And I think people hear experimentation and feel overwhelmed with what they think it might mean. But to me, what experimentation is I've seen something, so I have a because statement. Because my users are leaving my trial sign-up page, right? That's my statement. I see people leaving my trial sign-up page. Why? All these visitors to trial sign-up page, they're leaving. If I reduce the number of fields required to sign up for a trial, then I will see an increase in conversion from visitor trial rate because at the moment, everyone seems to be leaving my trial page for some reason. That's an experiment, right? Take away 2 fields that you can otherwise get later from the client and see what happens to your trial sign-up rate. That's an experiment. Things like that. I'm going to change the color of my primary CTA on my homepage from green to blue. That's an experiment, right? You've got a belief of what might happen, but just having that experimental mindset and that growth, I don't want to call it growth mindset. I think that's overused, but that experimental mindset of continuing to adjust your approach to problems to find the optimal path to growth, I think is easy enough to do for anyone, so long as you start small and just keep it disciplined. Yeah. So continual experimentation would be my advice.
I'll back that up. Speaking of the sign-up forms, where I used to have for a partnership client of mine, phone number, and then we weren't getting many phone numbers or they were just dropping off. And then I just had phone number and then told them why we want their phone number. And the response rate went up by like 36-fold.
Yeah.
Definitely experiment with cool stuff like that.
we had a previous product that asked them for their, what do you want your business URL to be? And it was, they had to type in the URL and add like / their business. I said, why are we asking for it? Why don't we just give it to them? And so we took that field out, and instead we just added their domain as the final part of the URL and then sent it to them after. Asking people to generate a password versus sending them password via email after. Like, there's things that you can do in that space that are quite significant. Yeah.
Well, Luke, that was epic. Thank you for coming on and sharing a whole bunch of gold with our listeners. If you're listening and you want to stop flying blind with your SaaS metrics, go check out Baremetrics. You'll save a whole bunch of time, make smarter decisions, and you'll get to actually know what's working.
Yeah.
Luke, are you able to let listeners know where they can connect with you, find out more about Baremetrics, and then I'll drop some links in the show notes below.
Yeah, check it out, baremetrics.com. We've also got Baremetrics Academy, which is a whole heap of free resources for founders to jump in there, calculators, templates. There's a great how to calculate LTV template that we just released that allows you to do 4 different types of LTV. We talk about clear metrics, but LTV can be calculated a multitude of ways depending on what variable you put in there. That's really good there as well. We've got financial models in there as well. So the Academy and then our space in the resources page is great from baremetrics.com. We're very active on Reddit at the moment. We've ramped up our community there, and we're continually posting. You'll find me on LinkedIn most days. We're really trying to increase our thought leadership in this space, and that's me, part of the reason I'm doing sort of podcasts and short videos as well. I think there's a lot of good content out there to discuss. There's a lot of good growth strategies and metrics out there that we need to be talking about more, and I'm happy to do that. And for your users too, Russ, your readers, your network, like we talked about that partnership space, if anyone wants just to reach out for advice, I'm happy to jump on a call with anyone. They don't need to be a Baremetrics customer. If they're interested in the SaaS space, because that just gives me stuff to talk about, right? I'm like, hey, I had a really good call this week with a guy who's struggling to get past 10K MRR. Here's what I told him. And I share that, right? And that's great. So anyone wants to talk to me offline about growth strategies, happy to do it.
Love it. Well, thanks again, Luke. We'll drop all those links in the notes. Until next time, thanks for tuning into the Scalable podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.